Okay, good afternoon to whoever is from India, and good morning to Sir Professor Wilson and anyone around the world, whoever has joined us. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us with such a short notice. So, today we are starting our program, that is a small tribute to Professor John Conway, who we can say was a playful master of games to transform mathematics. So this is like our plan is just to pay a small tribute to him, a lecture series on the memory of Professor Conway, which will start today and will continue for next consecutive Saturdays. So maybe I should start. After that, I will hand over my uh, talk to, to hand over to Professor Sukanto Das for giving us a brief presentation. After that, we'll have Professor Wilson uh, and his introduction. So all of us maybe already all of us are already big fan of Professor Conway. He was a legendary mathematician who stood out for his love of games and for bringing mathematics to the masses. He can be told as one of the most versatile mathematicians of the past century, a wizard, polymath, and storyteller, and a natural problem solver whose unassisted feats often left his colleagues stunned. Although he was based at Princeton University in his later years, but he found fame at Cambridge as a student and later professor from 1957 to 1987, if I'm not wrong. Conway claimed that he had never worked a day in his life. Instead, he purported to have frittered away reams and reams of time doing nothing, being lazy, and playing games, specifically silly children games. Still, he was Princeton's John von Neumann Professor in Applied and Computational Mathematics and Professor of Mathematics till 2013 when he was transferred to emeritus status. He was roundly praised as magical genius, the coin which was uh, the term that was coined to describe the famous physicist Richard Feynman. And Conway has been active researcher and fixer in Princeton math department probably even in his late 70s. And only 2 years, around 3 years ago, he had a stroke for which he was consigned to a nursing home. But still, that time also he continued regularly his research and discussion with his colleagues over phone. And we lost him last year on 11th of April when he was 82 due to COVID-19 complications. So tomorrow is his first death anniversary. So today we are starting this just to remember the legend and as a small tribute to him. Now I would like to invite Professor Sukanta Das to share with us a brief presentation about Conway, the playful master of games who transform mathematics. Sir, if you please.
Thank you, Kamalika, and a good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much. So we are really grateful to Professor Robert Wilson who agreed to give us some time in this day. So I am just saying few words about Professor John Conway. I have a brief presentation. Let me start that presentation first. So This is John Horton Conway. Kamalika mentioned that we lost this great mathematician 1 year ago, and this is again, we should say one victim of COVID-19 coronavirus. So we have decided to spend 1 month in memory, of say, John Horton Conway. See, who is this Conway to us? We, some people of India who do research in Cellular Automata, we are the students of Cellular Automata. I recall the days, my student time. When I was a student and I decided to start working with Cellular Automata, and my bachelor course we have studied automata theory. But what is Cellular Automaton? That was unknown to me. Then what is that? What is the definition? What is the meaning of this? What is the implication of this? Then I can recall the days almost 20 years back. My teacher introduced John Conway, and he said, okay, you just study game of life. So what is game of life? Some game. And see, when we have started exploring game of life, and we are not said, the term cellular automata. So is the and we just explored some game. We said it's a zero player game, and so when I have entered in the domain of cellular automata, and in fact we have decided to work with cellular automata. At that time, we started my journey with this game of life, and then and from the study of this game of life, we get we become familiar with the cellular automata, and in this way we get involved in the work of John Conway. Well, some pictures of John Conway. So we have collected these pictures of this great mathematician. So this all we have collected from some internet, some sources. Although, so myself and we the people who work with cellular automata, we are familiar with game of life, but Conway is not only game of life. He has many shades. Okay, we are the computer scientists. We work with computer science. We are not mathematician in that way. But when we started exploring Conway, then we have seen, okay, he has so many sets. So this is the word cloud. We have plotted it. We have collected the words. Some data we have taken from Wikipedia and some internet sources. Then we have some program. We have plotted the words, and this is the spread of works of Professor Conway, and you can see Professor Conway is associated with so many things. Game of life is one of them. So we get familiar, as I've said, we get familiar with Conway through this game of life. But the point is, game of life is one of them. So he worked with finite groups, knot theory, number theory, combinatorial game theory, coding theory, geometric topology. Okay, so and the point is, you can see that in every place he had a great contribution. So not only game of life. So say, as I've said, he worked with combinatorial game theory, So he worked with the theory of partition games. He worked with the others, Elvin Bucklecamp and Richard Guy. He worked with, games and puzzles. He wrote two books on combinatorial game theory. See, group theory is another area of interest. Okay, he explored sporadic groups, and Robert Curtis and Simon P. Norton are his co-researchers. Okay, he developed some groups. Nowadays we call them Conway groups, etc. So if you see that in a group theory also, he worked, he has several contribution. And in geometric topology, so we have a new term called Conway polynomial in geometric topology. And he worked with the knot theory, right? And in geometry also, he has contribution, great contribution in geometry. And he also, there's a great theorem called free will theorem. So he proved this free will theorem with Simon B. Cochen. And finally, I mean, we have to mention that what I've said, that his great contribution is in the cell automata. Actually, he popularized this game of the cell automaton. See, cell automaton, it was first discovered by von Neumann and Stanislaw Ulam. But at that time, it was not so popular. Okay, so some mathematicians worked with. But the contribution of Professor Conway is he made it very, very popular. Even common people, you know, uh, even people who don't, who are not the mathematician, they also know the term game of life, and they become familiar with cell automaton. So, what is the beauty of game of life? So, the point is, I can show you a brief simulation. So later, so there are few award, few awards. So we have written a few words which he has received. Actually, by these words, we cannot understand the contribution and influence of this great personality. So, okay, well, let me now briefly concentrate on this game of life. So, game of life. What is the game of life? A simple game. So Conway was master of game, right? So and what it is? So you have two-dimensional grid, right? Two-dimensional infinite grid. Consider a two-dimensional infinite grid, and each grid, we call it. I mean, each cell of the grid, it is having a, I mean, it is either alive or dead. So a cell of the grid has two states, either alive or dead. So when this way, a grid, you can think of an initial configuration. Initially some cells of the grid, they're either alive or dead. Now the system evolves. How it evolves? It has some rule. Sometimes some cell, either it was initially dead or alive, dead cell becomes alive, or live cell may become dead. When this transition occurs, life to dead and dead to life, so some rule is there. So a dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors become a live cell, right? And when it dies, so a cell with say less than 2 neighbors as alive. it becomes dead. Similarly, a live cell which is having more than say 3 cells, still live cells, it becomes dead. Right. So this simple rule is followed. Now what we get is it's a really game. So as if the cells are playing some game, life to death and death to life. What happens? You can see a beautiful patterns are generated. I shall show you, a brief, demo. So I have a brief simulation I have taken from internet. So this is available in net. So just to show you what you can get from this one. See, we are seeing that some beautiful patterns are generated. Some initial configuration, some initial configurations are given. Just see what is happening here. See, no, you have a 2D grid, some white cells, white points, they're the live cells, and black, they're dead. So here, some cells are there, they have 2 states, black and white. White is live, and here, black is dead. Some configuration is given, and all the cells, they're acting together, they're working together. As a result, these beautiful patterns are generated. See, there is no central control. There is no central control. And this is cellular automaton. And as I was saying, we have learned cellular automaton from this game. It's what, how it works. Cellular automaton, how cellular automaton works. And what are the beauties. See what I was saying, there is no central control. All the cells, they work together. So there is a sense of collective effort. There is a sense of democracy. Because see, all the cells, they're acting. There is no one is superior. No one is dictating others. So we are getting some simulation, not by some writing some program. Right? So all the cells, they are working together. So game of life has a great impact. As I've said, I have learned, and not like me. So any discussion on cellular automata starts with game of life. And this is not the only one. If you want to learn cellular automata, you have to start from the game of life. But this is not the only one. See here what you're saying. Many people have analyzed this game of life. See, if you want to see the growth of bacteria, how bacteria colony grows, we can get idea from this game of life. From economics point of view, some economists, they have used understand, the growth of city, how a city grows using this game of life. I recall, see, in a popular program by by Hawking, Stephen Hawking. So he was discussing about the universe, a program on Discovery Channel, and he was talking about the universe, the history of universe. Then he started discussion with his game of life, and that is the impact. That is the impact game of life. That is the impact of Conway's work. He didn't say all these things, but from his work we get so many insights. So we have decided actually. So this is a great personality who has really, so many impact in science, technology, in arts, right, in social science. So we have tried. We are the small group of in India who do research in cellular automata, and we are in love uh, with Professor Conway. We never meet Professor Conway, but we are in love with Professor Conway through this game of life. So we have decided, we have lost him in last year. So we have decided to remember this great personality, in this month. So with these a few words, I stop. I thank you, Professor, once again, Professor Wilson, to give us time, and I hope all of us will enjoy. So we have other two programs next Saturday, and next to next Saturday we have two programs we have already set. So I think all of us will enjoy, and all of us will interact. Today, all of us will interact with Professor Robert Wilson, and will enjoy. So thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the inspiring and wonderful presentation. Yeah, like you, like me, maybe most of us have been fan of Conway and in awe of awe to his legacy. But how he was as a person, what did it felt to attend his regular courses and to work with him? What was his lifestyle and style of work? How his legacy is carried on? We don't know because we never met him. But we are lucky to have among us today Professor Robert Wilson, who has readily agreed to spend some time with us, who has seen Conway from very personal and professional level. Professor Wilson was a doctoral student of Conway, but that is not the only identity of him. Let me give the formal introduction of him. Professor Robert Wilson has been a professor in algebra and combinatorics in the School of Mathematical Sciences at Queen Mary University of London, from where he took his early retirement at the end of 2016. He has done his PhD, BA, MA, PhD, all, and was a Ross Ball student from Trinity College, Cambridge. He started his career as research fellow, Jesus College, Cambridge, followed by official fellow and college lecturer, Winton College, Cambridge, and then lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, professor in the University of Birmingham. His research is mainly in finite group theory and related areas such as representation theory, some aspects of combinatorics and computational techniques, and algorithms applicable to finite group. He is best known for his work on classifying the maximal subgroups of finite simple groups and the work in the famous monster group. And apart from academia, he also has another identity. Professor Wilson is also an accomplished violin, viola, and piano player, having played as the principal viola in the Sinfonia of Birmingham, if I am spelling it correctly. If I am misspelling it, Professor Sir, please forgive me for that. Due to a damaged finger, he now principally plays the coda. So he himself is a wonderful person. So we are lucky to have him today with us, and we are eagerly waiting to hear from him. So, sir, if you want to say some few words before I start asking you questions.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. I only knew Conway really for about, I suppose, 11 years from when I went to Cambridge as a student in 1975 to when he left Cambridge to go to Princeton in 1986. So I'll just say a few words about how I interacted with him in those 11 years. Of course, as an undergraduate student, I went to his lectures. I didn't talk to him or interact directly with him, but I went to a course he gave in the first year. It was an optional course, no exams, on formal logic and set theory. And then in the second year, he gave a course, it was called Algebra 3. So it was things like linear maps and quadratic forms and things like that. And what I chiefly remember about it was the revision notes that he provided for this course. At the end of the course, he handed out to every member of the audience one sheet of paper. And one sheet of paper contained the entire course, including all the proofs, all the examples, everything, the entire course. It was typed on two sides of this sheet of paper, and it had everything in it. It was a work of art, really, to get 24 lectures onto one piece of paper. But I think what inspired me most to work with him was the fourth year course he gave on sporadic simple groups, which was really exactly what I wanted to do. I found it so fascinating that I knew that I wanted to do. And then at the end of the fourth year, it's a very brutal system in Cambridge. They have this exam, the Part 3 exam, which is absolutely brutal. Every separate exam has 3 questions. The first question is, write out everything that's in the first 8 lectures of the course. Second question is, write out everything that's in the second 8 lectures of the course. Third question is, write out everything that's in the last 8 lectures of the course. And you've got 3 hours to do this. So, and at the end of this, you're ranked, and the first however many people it is, however many places they've got, first so many people can do their PhDs in Cambridge. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to have done well enough. But I was just lucky enough. I think at the very bottom of the list of people who got through. And then the same day, you have to go and find a supervisor. So I went to Conway and I said, will you be my supervisor? I want to do sporadic groups. And he said, well, you know, I'm not a group theorist. And then he tried other ways of putting me off by saying, well, you know, many of my students never finish their PhDs. So we had a bit of a discussion, and eventually he agreed to take me on as his student. And when he started, he gave me some things to read, which were not about group theory at all. They were about lattices. And I read several of these papers on lattices. And eventually I found some, the lattices took me towards the groups. And they took me towards the quaternionic reflection group for the Paul-Yanko group, which is one of the sporadic groups, and is contained in the Conway group, and it's related to the Leech lattice. So that's how I got into that. And then I thought, well, there are other versions of the Leech lattice. There's a quaternionic version of the Leech lattice. And so I studied that. And that was what my first paper was about. It was about the group theory associated to this quaternionic Leech lattice. And then I thought, well, if there's a real Leech lattice and a complex Leech lattice and two different quaternionic Leech lattices, what about an octonionic Leech lattice? What about Cayley numbers? I did lots of calculations and nothing worked. And Conway said, it's impossible. You can't do it with octonions because they're not associative. So there's no linear algebra, there's no lattice, there's nothing you can do. It's impossible. Well, let me tell you another thing about what Conway's attitude to problems. And many supervisors will say you should work on an easy problem and a hard problem. So that if you can't solve the hard problem, at least you've got the easy problem to fall back on. Conway said you should have 4 problems. You should have your easy problem and your hard problem. You should also have a trivial problem, so that if you can't do the easy problem, then you can still do the trivial problem. And you should have an impossible problem. Because if you get really lucky and you solve the impossible problem, then you've really made it. So you should have the 4 problems, from trivial to impossible. In fact, I think that was the version a few years before me. By the time he got to me, he'd expanded this to 6 problems. So you should have, as well as trivial, easy, hard, and impossible, you should also have moderately easy and moderately hard in the middle. And he really put this into practice. He was always working on 6 different things at the same time. And making, well, yes, making progress on most of them, not necessarily the impossible ones. So anyway, what that meant was that I didn't give up on this impossible problem of making an octonionic Leech lattice. And it took me 20 years, but eventually I succeeded in working out how it had to work. And at that point, I thought, so that was I think in 2009. And so I thought I had better contact Conway and tell him about this. Now, of course, Conway doesn't have an email address that he reads. I mean, he got so many thousands and thousands of emails that he couldn't possibly keep an account. So he only had a secret account. So what I did was I emailed the office in the Princeton Maths department and said, I've got something really exciting to tell Conway. I think he will really be interested. Can you forward this email to him? So they did. And the next day I got a reply from Conway saying in capital letters, "I think that is fantastic." And that really, so it took me 20 years, but I got there in the end. So anyway, let's perhaps go back to my PhD, and how it was working with Conway for PhD. I told you that he gave me these papers and said, read them. He never gave me a problem. He might have done eventually, but I found my own problem. This, as I said, about the quaternionic Leech lattice. And so I worked on the maximal subgroup problem really from then on. And the breakthrough came when, at some point in my third year, I think, Conway went away on sabbatical for a month or two. He didn't tell me before he went that he was going away. So I had a month without a supervisor. And that's when I started having to talk to other people. And I talked to Simon Norton and John Thompson. And they gave me some ideas that I'd been missing. And so they enabled me to actually study the Leech lattice in a deeper way than I had before, and to understand the maximal subgroup problem in a deeper way, and make the progress that then managed eventually to get me a postdoc after my PhD. I suppose the other thing that really helped me to get a job was that I worked on the Atlas of Finite Groups. I became an author of the Atlas of Finite Groups, which was a project that Conway started probably about 10 years before with Robert Curtis, who you mentioned. And so it became then this eventually 5 authors. At various times it was going to be 6 or 7 authors, and various people drifted in and out of the project. But, and getting my name on the front of that book was very important for my career. What else should I say? I should probably not say so much about myself, more about Conway. As I said, I went to many of his lecture courses, and he often gave the impression that the lectures were not prepared, because he would talk as though he was just talking to you in the cafe or something. He wouldn't talk as though he was reading a prepared script on lecture notes or anything. And often he would say, well, we could do it like this, we could do it like this, which do you want? You know, things like this. And later on, when he gave lectures, he gave seminars research seminars to audiences, he would say, I've got 6 talks, which one do you want me to give? And eventually I realized that it wasn't that the talks weren't prepared. They were very well prepared, but they weren't written down. They were prepared in his head. And so, because they were in his head, they varied slightly from one performance to another, just like a piece of music might. Sometimes he'd go off in a different direction, do things differently, and so on. Ornament the music in a different way. And that was what gave the impression of it being spontaneous when it really wasn't. I made the mistake at one point of thinking that it was possible to give lectures like this without preparation. I very quickly found that it was not. That it's quite possible to go up and talk for an hour without notes and to go through the subject matter, but it's absolutely essential to prepare very thoroughly beforehand. Well, I think that's probably about all that I've really prepared. So, would you like to? What else would you like to know about Conway?
Okay, thank you, sir, for sharing your experience. Like, we also went through your path almost. Like, we could visualize what you felt at that time. We just felt happy at some time with your emotions. We felt sad with your emotions. Thank you so much, sir. I have like you mentioned that how it felt like working under him as your guide. He was already that much famous. So did you feel some kind of extra pressure to like he also you said that he also tried to discourage you beforehand that you should not take him as a supervisor. Although it is like it might be a normal thing, but to him, like when you started working under him, what was like how much pressure you felt at that time that you have to make even Conway some like satisfied with your work? What was the kind of pressure that you were feeling at that time? Was this some kind of extra thing if you had chosen someone other than Conway, or it was normal? What it felt working under him?
That's a good question. I don't remember feeling any extra pressure. I think it was just the way it was. It would be the same with any supervisor, and also I didn't actually know very much about Conway. I didn't know that how famous he was for all these different things. I don't think I knew about the game of life. I didn't know about his work on foundations on numbers and games. I didn't know anything about him apart from the Conway group. And he wasn't a professor at that stage. He was just Dr. Conway. He wasn't a fellow. He became a fellow of the Royal Society while I was doing my PhD, and then he became a professor. And by that stage, it became a bit more obvious that he was a really very powerful mathematician and very well known. But I still didn't know it's the breadth of his mathematics that's so impressive. That there are these, not just group theory on the cellular automata, but the topology, the foundational stuff, and later this stuff in physics as well, the free will theorem. He was interested in everything, and he read an enormous amount of stuff. One of the ways he used to work was he would go to a local coffee shop. It doesn't exist anymore. It was called Belinda's, a coffee shop in Cambridge, and he would go there every morning for his breakfast and work in this noisy surroundings. And his work would, depending on what he was working on, he would be scribbling on napkins and pieces of paper, or he'd be reading a book. And his books would be about the history of important problems in mathematics or in physics or in anything else. So he was learning around the subject all the time. Very, very wide reading. So he knew an enormous amount about an enormous number of different things. And if you caught him in the right mood, which wasn't difficult actually, he would tell you about any of these things. If you showed some interest in any of these things, he would tell you about it. And so I learned a lot that way, just from listening to him talk in the common room, in the bar, in the evening. He had an enormous number of stories. Some of it, mostly mathematical, not all of it. And so he'd teach you mathematics, not in a lecture room, but in the pub. I couldn't keep up, because we'd go to the pub after the seminar, drink beer. Conway drank a lot of beer, a lot of strong beer. After 2 beers, I couldn't keep up anymore. It was impossible. It would just go in one ear and out the other. But still, I learned a huge amount of background material that way, that I probably wouldn't have learnt from another supervisor who might have said, go away and read this book, it'll teach you about that. Conway never said, go and read the book. He said, I'll tell you about it. Here's how you do it. And he'd sit down for an hour and explain all about it. It would have taken you a week to read in a book. And so from that point of view, he was an ideal supervisor.
Sir, have you you said that he gave you one page during your graduation? He gave you 1 page content of the whole course. So he has some great fascination about making things very precise and neat and everything, right? Precisely doing every theory to the smallest. He had a proof
Exactly.
system.
Exactly. He was never satisfied with any version of anything until he had made it as simple as possible. It had to be as simple as possible. Exactly what Einstein said. It must be as simple as possible, but not more so. That was Conway's attitude in everything. So when he was working on a research problem, it was very difficult for the rest of us to keep up, because every day he would have a new, simpler version than he had the day before. And so he had to start all over again from scratch, because everything had changed. And with everything he did, it had to be, in the end, if you couldn't fit it on one sheet of paper, it wasn't worth doing. I remember one particular example. It was so I was quite involved in it. There's one of the sporadic groups, Yanko's first group. No, Yanko's third group, J3. It was really work of Richard Parker, one of the other authors of the Atlas, who was doing some computer work with this particular group, and he discovered a new representation. So instead of having 18-dimensional complex representations, he found a 9-dimensional representation over the field of order 4. And so Richard Parker then had proved that this Yanko group was a subgroup of the unitary group in dimension 9, U9 of 2, unitary group, 9 by 9 matrices over the field of order 4. As soon as Conway got hold of that fact, he started scribbling on bits of paper, saying, now I know that I can do it with 9 by 9 matrices. I want to find these 9 by 9 matrices by hand on pieces of paper and tell you what they are. And he did that. And every day, the matrices had changed from the day before. They had got simpler from what they were the day before. Until at the end of the day, I mean, at the end of a few days of this, he had one piece of paper with some completely new notation that Conway always was inventing new notations for everything. Completely new notation in which he had on one piece of paper the entire construction of J3. I don't know if he ever actually published that. It appeared in the Atlas, but I don't think he published a paper on it. But that taught me a way of working that has been very useful to me later on. For example, as I told you about this octonionic Leech lattice, I did the same thing. I said, there must be an octonionic Leech lattice. Let's try and write it down. And it took me, I don't know, a month of and several hundred pieces of paper, but each time I got a version of it which was simpler than the previous version. And then I went back to the beginning and said, this isn't simple enough, let's simplify it some more. And I kept going around that loop, as Conway had taught me to do, until eventually it was simple enough that I couldn't simplify it anymore. It was obviously at that stage at Einstein's point of being as simple as possible, but no simpler. And so these two ways of working, the first of all of having complete range of problems from trivial to impossible, and secondly, simplify, simplify, simplify. Never make things more complicated, always simplify. I've been trying, since I retired, I've been trying to do this for the group theory that exists in physics. I think this may be related to cellular automata at some point, because again, I went back to Conway's methods, I went back to Einstein's thoughts as well. And one of the things that Einstein said about physics was, and about quantum mechanics in particular, there really should be a discrete theory of quantum mechanics. It shouldn't be a continuous theory of Lie groups and so on. It should be discrete. It should be like the game of life. It should be completely discrete and completely deterministic. A cellular automaton, in fact. So that's my impossible problem, to create a finite or a discrete theory of quantum mechanics that Einstein was unable to create, but thought should exist. So if Einstein can't do it, that is clearly an impossible problem, wouldn't you say? But just because Einstein couldn't do it, I'm not going to give up. I know it's an impossible problem. And I've been working on it for, well, I don't know. I suppose I've been preparing for it for 10 years. I've been working on it specifically for 2. I haven't succeeded, but I've gone round Conway's simplification loop about 20 times now. And it's getting simpler and simpler every time. Not only have I gone round the whole loop 20 times, actually, each loop has a whole load of simplification steps on it. So it's getting simpler and simpler. Before too long, I may be able to write down a cellular automaton that does quantum mechanics in the way that Einstein would have wanted it to. Well, no one will believe me until I've finished it and got the whole thing done. It's no good going round this simplification loop 19 times if it needs 20. And it's an impossible problem, so it's still one of my 6 problems, and I divide it down into smaller problems. So I'm looking at some easy problems and some hard problems, and so on. And hoping that they will all come together at the end of the day to make this new theory of quantum mechanics. Well, might not work, but it might work. I think it might have been another saying of Conway's, or it might have come from somewhere else. But it was Richard Parker who said to me, never discount the possibility of success. In other words, even though your problem appears to be impossible, don't dismiss the possibility that you might actually be able to solve it. So, anyway, I'm talking too much about my own work now.
It is very, very inspiring, sir.
So I have a query. So as I have understood that when you were at Cambridge, then you were in touch with Conway, and during that time, Conway was developing Game of Life, right? So beautiful, so simple, and actually it's really very, very, very simple. I mean, 2 states, the rule is very simple. So my question is, to reach to this simple rule of Game of Life, I mean, did he use many computer simulation or any kind of computer simulation?
No, he did it all on bits of paper.
Only paper.
And he experimented with lots of different versions of the rule. Before he came up with the one that actually works in the end, he tried all sorts of possibilities. And so I didn't see him do this, but people I know did see him do it. And what happened apparently was he would spend some days on one particular version, using lots of pieces of paper to see what happens. And when nothing interesting happened, he tried to analyze why and modify the rules to get to try something else. And he tried all these possibilities until eventually, suddenly, the right one was there.
Okay.
And it obviously is the right one, and it's because he tried all the possibilities, he knows it's the only possibility. It's the only one that does anything interesting.
I'd like to.
in the physical world, you need a three-dimensional version of the game of life, and it may not. And quantum mechanics is a little bit more complicated than just saying this is alive or dead. It's not much more complicated than that, but it is a little bit more complicated. And I reckon that each individual cell has 48 states, I think. I'd like to simplify it below 48, but I think 48 is... Well, actually, it's really just a cube. Just imagine dividing the whole of space into a cubic lattice. Now look at each individual cube. What's the symmetry group of the cube? Well, actually, we should only be able to rotate it. We shouldn't be able to reflect it. No, in real space, you can't reflect the cube, so you can rotate it. Well, that's a group of order 24. Now you just need to double it to get the spin up, spin down. So 48 is all you need. But you do need 48. You can't, my previous version had 24, and it didn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because it's too simple. I'd simplified it too much. Doesn't work. But 48, I think, does. So now you've just got to look at these cubes, color the faces like a Rubik's Cube so you can tell which one's which, and then spin them. So it's got to spin up, spin down, inside and outside, or whatever you want to call it. And it seems to me that that is simplified as far as it possibly could be, but not more. So if there is a cellular automaton that works to describe quantum mechanics, this must essentially be it. You've got to divide space into cubes, have a look at the individual cubes with this group, these 48 different states for each cube. So maybe next week I'll be able to tell you what the 48 states are and how to do it. But this week I can't.
Well, I'd like to ask a quick question.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that the answer is a simple no, but cellular automata are, of course, models of physics and other things, and they are also dynamical systems, but they also have group theory aspects, and I happen to study some, so I would be interested in whether Conway ever happened to make any kind of connections between group theory and cellular automata, given that he obviously knew both.
I don't think that he did.
I had the same impression, but...
I mean, he did study automata of various different types, not just the cellular automata, but he created Turing machines out of anything he could make a Turing machine out of. One of the things, I don't know if you know it, he produced a list of, I think it was 11 rational numbers, which was a Turing machine, because it...
Yes, this is the Fractran computer. It's a very interesting thing, yes.
Yeah. And so that was one thing he did, and then yeah, so
yes,
the game of life...
I remember that was due to him. That's a very important result, I think.
Yeah. And so I think he may not have done the same thing with the game of life, but maybe somebody else did it. The game of life can also be converted into a universal Turing machine.
Yes, this is in the book Winning Ways, actually.
Oh, right, okay.
They explain a proof of this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hello,
Sir,
sir. Yeah, please go ahead.
yeah. Sir, you were saying that whenever Conway was asked about cellular automata, he just discouraged that discussion, saying it as history. Why he said like that? Can you do you have any idea?
Well, I think the point is that Conway was interested in everything. But most people only know about the game of life. So when a random person wants to talk to Conway, they want to talk about the game of life. And so he just got bored with it and wanted to talk about something else.
Okay.
And
And
that's the same.
Yeah,
So the
sir.
other story is.
Hello, sir. My name is Shukriti. Sir, my question is, can you please tell me, is there any impact of game of life in pure mathematics?
That's a difficult question. I think the game of life has had such a big impact on so many things that the answer must be yes in some way. It may be hard to point to any particular sort of direct application, but I think that the way of thinking that created this game has influenced so many people. And the fact that it's, well, this is going back to physics again, the fact that cellular automata have inspired people to create physical theories based on it is one thing, but within pure mathematics, well, it certainly had an impact in logic with the Turing machines and so on. In algebra, probably not. Yeah, I can't think of anything just specific anyway.
And sir, do you, do you motivate? Does the discovery of game of life motivate you in some way in your research field?
Well, as I said, it's inspired me in the physics very much, because physics must be discrete. It must be a cellular automata. The question is which one and how.
Sir, according to you, what is the biggest contribution of Conway in this, in maybe mathematics, physics? He has touched many fields and he put remarkable contribution everywhere. So, according to you, what is his biggest contribution?
I don't know that I can actually choose one to be the biggest, because he had a major impact in so many different areas of mathematics. And to me, when I was his PhD student, obviously it was the Conway group and his work on the Leech lattice, which was, to me, the most important. But to other people, other things were more important. And his work on knot theory, for example, was very inspirational. On on numbers and games, the foundations of numbers. How do you create numbers out of nothing? It was different from what anyone else has done, but and I'm not sure that people really use it, but it's what you can do if you think completely differently from anybody else. You think of a problem completely from scratch without being bound by anyone else's rules. And he did that in every area that he worked on.
So I think what has been? Yeah. Yes, sir. Please continue.
So I was just going to say again, I think his work is important in lots of areas, and you can't say which one's the most important. It depends on your own priorities, not on him.
So, what has been your what has been the greatest impact of him on you? How you have been telling that he taught you how to solve a problem, some approach to solve problems, and that you are the master of that problem, not the other way. So whether that is the only impact he had on you, or he touched you somehow in very personal level on the simplicity of his lifestyle, on the way he dealt with the problem, that has impacted you in your future research that you did after leaving Cambridge. So you were in touch with him while he was at Cambridge. So after that, how that like that influence carried on in your life? Can you just tell us more?
Well, of course, I worked closely with him for 3 or 4 years during my PhD, and less closely after that. So after I'd done my PhD, I worked more or less on my own. But of course, he was always around, and the way that he worked was very clear. You could see him working and how he was doing it and how he was thinking. And it was obviously very successful. And so I've kind of modeled my work on the way that he did things. That is, do everything for yourself. Don't take anyone else's word for it. If Richard Parker comes along and says the Yanko group is a subgroup of U9 of 2, don't ask Richard how he did it. No, do it yourself. Start again from scratch. That was his method. Always do it yourself. Start again from scratch. And so that's my method. So it doesn't work as well with me as it did with Conway, but there's a certain amount that you can learn from the way that other people have approached problems. But at the end of the day, you have to think for yourself. And if there's an unsolved problem there's a reason it's unsolved. It's because the way that other people have thought about it isn't good enough to solve that problem. You have to think about it a different way in order to solve it. That means you should not take too much notice of how other people approach the problem. Yes, learn a bit about how people approach the problem, but then think not how can I go further with this way of thinking, but what is wrong with that way of thinking about it, and how can I think about the whole problem in a better way? What assumptions are they making that are not necessary to make, or that might even be the wrong assumptions? And go right back to the beginning and start thinking about the assumptions. Are the assumptions correct? If not, how can we change them? The same with the game of life. You start with some assumptions. You work on it, nothing happens. You go back to the assumptions, assume something else, try again. That doesn't work. Go back to the assumptions, change the assumptions, start again.
So,
Throw away all the stuff that doesn't work.
So I have another quick question, by the way. You mentioned that you have a cellular automaton that you're cooking up, which encodes the physics. Is this a reversible cellular automaton, and is it in the standard cellular automaton model? So you have a neighborhood and a local rule. I know that you don't want to talk too deeply, maybe if it's not finished, but I'm just interested in whether you're talking about the same model which a game of life fits, or it's a generalized model.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about cellular automata.
So usually we take the binary configurations on z to the 3. In your case, we would take the contour set topology on this, and then you would take the shift commuting continuous function. That would be one mathematical way to state this. So it's a slight generalization of game.
Well, as I say, I've learned from Conway. I learn as much of the way other people are doing things as I feel is necessary to learn, which is usually much less than other people think it's necessary to learn. And then I start thinking from scratch, make my own assumptions, try and see what works and what doesn't work. So that way you really understand why certain things don't work. It's it's a lesson of life, isn't it? You learn so much better from your own mistakes than you do from other people's mistakes. You can spend your life reading about other people's mistakes and trying to learn from them. It doesn't work. You make your own mistakes, you know exactly why it doesn't work. You know exactly how to put it right. Well, maybe you don't, but you know which bit, you know where the mistake is, and you know that's the bit you've got to concentrate on. So, and this particular model, I'm not being at all shy about it. You can read it as much as you like on my blog. The paper I'm writing this week won't be there till next week, but I forget who it was who said, somebody said to his student, don't worry about other people stealing your ideas. If your ideas are any good, you'll have to ram them down people's throats. In other words, if the ideas really solve the problems, then they're not in the mold of what other people have been doing, and people won't be interested in them. They won't listen to them unless you ram them down people's throats. So I'm trying to ram these ideas down people's throats by writing about it on my blog.
I didn't actually know about your blog. Thank you for pointing this out. You have an interesting writings there. I see.
Okay, thank you.
I was reading your blog, your recent blog. You have written on March 15, named Amateur Group Theory. Okay, so I was reading that blog and it was interesting. And what you have mentioned, and I have seen one recent paper in Arxiv in preprint server. And he was saying that it's the group theory extremely powerful, and we can understand many things of this universe of physics using this group theory. So so my simple query. So we are not expert actually of mathematics or physics. My simple question is: see, what you understand about group theory is a study of symmetry. It's very symmetrical. Study symmetrical systems. But do you think that the nature, the universe, they're very symmetrical? and we can understand many things using using the group theory.
Yes, I do. And I've almost told you what the group is by taking the symmetry group of a cube and taking its double cover to get the spin. Well, there are actually two double covers, so I haven't told you which one. But I think I've written it on my blog already, which is the right one. So that is the group of order 48 that I think is the key to the symmetry of the entire universe. So I'm just trying to develop enough of the model to make it work. And especially comparing this particular group to what's in the standard model. So that's what the paper I'm writing at the moment tries to do. This group of order 48, how does it compare to the group of order 64 that Dirac used? If you take the group generated by the Dirac matrices, the Gamma matrices, that's a group of order 64, which underlies the whole of the standard model of particle physics. It doesn't do everything, but it does a lot. And so I want to compare my group of order 48 with Dirac's group of order 64. Where they differ, why they differ, which one is right. Well, last night I started thinking about this. How do I match my group of order 48 to Dirac's group? And by the time I woke up this morning, I could see the answer. I could see what's wrong with Dirac's group and how this group corrects it. And it's just pure mathematics. It's just group theory. It's looking at the relations between the gamma matrices. They have to square, some of them square to +1, some of them square to -1. They have to anti-commute with each other. There's one relation which is wrong. You have to swap two of the gamma matrices in one of the relations. And then it works. Then you get 3 generations of electrons. And you get the symmetries that actually exist in the real world.
But is the nature very symmetrical? In the nature, we see so many asymmetries. So can we model all these things through the symmetries?
I believe so. I believe so. I'm starting at the bottom and I'm trying to work my way up.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I am asking too many questions, so I'll allow others to ask questions. Yeah, Shukriti.
Sir, you have worked with monster group that deals with so many data. I just saw your in the Wikipedia. Sir, can you relate this monster group with cellular automata somehow?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The monster is, of course, an extremely interesting group, and it has connections to all sorts of parts of mathematics. And some people think it has connections to physics. I don't think it has any connections to physics. But one of the important things that Conway did, of course, was the work on monstrous moonshine, which was happening at the time when I was a PhD student, and which was connecting the monster group and its character table, its representation theory, with some analytic number theory, which is a completely different subject, shouldn't have been connected at all. And yet they are connected. So this is an extremely important connection between two different parts of mathematics. But what it means for physics, I think it means nothing for physics. But there are still people who think it does have some impact on physics. But I think it's the cellular automata that describe physics, not the monster. And that there is no connection between the monster and the cellular automata. And therefore no connection between the monster and physics. That's my opinion, anyway.
Right. Thank you.
So I have a quick question. My question, Professor Wilson, as a mathematician and both musician also. So I'm specifically a researcher of cellular automata. I'm very interested in the beauty of cellular automata and the pattern generated by cellular automata as an art form, and also many people works on music generation by using cellular automata. So other mathematics, different field of mathematics also used in music and different art formation, and a new topic of research, algorithmic art, also developed in last decade. So as a mathematician and both musician, so I want to know your opinion on the impact of mathematics in music and art. So that's my question.
Well, when I was younger, I used to look at some of these things and use mathematics to analyze music or to write music or something like that. But now I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Now I find that you see, as a Western classical musician, my training is very mathematical. It's training to play the notes. Play one note after the another, and you play them in the right order, and you play them at the right speed and the right everything. It's very, very mathematical technique. But it completely forgets that there's music there. And one of my friends who plays the double bass in the orchestra said to me one day that when he started to play in a jazz band, having been trained as a classical musician, the other members of the band said to him, "You play the notes, but you're not playing the music." And so I think that art or music, it's about the soul. It's not about the mathematics. So I play music rather differently from the way I did when I was younger. And it's partly because I was learning this Cora. I found a teacher in Birmingham. There's an African who plays this, who learnt it when he was a child, and he taught me some of it. And again, I'm trying to analyze it mathematically, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work mathematically. It has to be played as music. I think that's why he's frustrated with me as a player, because I want him to teach me the notes, and for him it's not about the notes. It's about the music. And in that tradition of music, actually, it doesn't really matter what notes you play, apart from a few basic rules. Then it's up to your imagination. and what you feel and how you want to express yourself. So I don't believe in any, I don't, all this kind of mathematical music that seems to be fashionable these days. I don't like it. I don't find it to be music at all. It's just mathematics. That's my view.
Thank you for your opinion.
He said, you have, I think you want to say something.
No, not on not on music, but I had a query about Professor Conway's attitude, philosophical attitude towards mathematics. Actually, we all know that he gave a different interpretation to numbers. I mean, game theoretic interpretation and so on. That's fantastic. And so, Professor Wilson, do you, or what do you say about his philosophical position about mathematics, about the ontology of mathematics? Because if numbers are interpreted differently, then what remains then? Was he really, I mean, quote unquote, realist in mathematics, or what else? I mean, if there are different interpretations possible, then how will you account for that? I mean, what was, I mean, the concrete question is, what was his attitude towards the philosophy of mathematics in particular? Yeah.
I don't know. I actually don't know. He was always doing mathematics.
He was doing, yeah.
Philosophizing about mathematics.
Playing mathematics, rather.
Playing mathematics, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It was a game to him. That's right.
Yeah. So if one plays mathematics, he merely perhaps doesn't look for truth.
I suppose that's right, yes. It's a game. Is it an interesting game? Is it a useful game? That's the point.
Maybe useful, may not be useful also sometimes, but it is a game after all. I mean, in this,
yes,
if somebody accepts that, then it is a game straight away. And I mean, I would like to know what was Professor Conway's attitude towards that, if you could say something. For instance, Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Did he ever comment on this incompleteness theorem or things like that?
Not to me. I don't remember him ever talking about things like that. I don't think he really found them that interesting. It wasn't the right sort of game for him. It was some kind of, there's some kind of restriction on what sort of games you can play. But Conway was just interested in playing the games.
Yeah, but you mentioned at the beginning of your lecture that you attended one of his logic courses. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yes.
And what was his attitude towards logic when he was introducing logic? Do you remember?
Well, I was very young at the time. It was the first year undergraduate.
But from your experience, later experiences, can you say something?
He taught a syllabus. You know, there were things that he was supposed to teach, and he taught what he was supposed to to teach, and so he taught a formal system of set theory, starting from the empty set and building the I forget, but it was a standard theory of building the integers from the empty set and the Sumelo-Frankel. Well, I don't know. I never took much interest in it myself, but it's the standard theory of basing. I suppose it's the Bourbaki theory of how to build set theory out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he taught. But I didn't get any sense of any attitude that he might have had about this. He was just teaching what he had to teach.
Okay. Thank you. Another quick question. It is about what you remarked about physics, that things should be discretized in any case, as I understand. Yeah. But on the other hand, our feeling about world, say for example, space and time, two fundamental things are sort of continuous, and Zeno's paradox is still there in our head. We cannot remove it.
Yes.
Yeah. So how can you account for the discretization and I mean, physics should be discrete, but reality is continuous. How can you?
No, I don't think reality is continuous.
You don't think so?
I think the continuous reality is an illusion.
Okay. Okay.
So if you take a large enough number of small enough things, it appears to be continuous. And so one of the things that I've been thinking hard about for years is how does the appearance of continuity in our world arise from something that's fundamentally discrete?
Yeah.
And I've come to the conclusion it's the representation theory of a finite group that does this. The discreteness comes from the finite group itself, spin group on the cube, and the continuity comes from taking the representation theory over real numbers. So that everything that you actually, when you measure things, you're not measuring the actual cube, you're measuring continuous variables. You've got, your cube is embedded in an environment, and it's the environment that gives you the continuous, the illusion of continuous variables. I mean, it's like in that demonstration that we saw earlier of the game of life. If you take a big enough model and you look so that you can't see the individual squares anymore, it starts to look continuous, and it starts to look like life. And the same has to work in physics in general. It has to, I think.
Now, what you say seems like the Buddhist ontological position that you live through existence in moments. So
Yeah.
disguised existence in moments. That is one Buddhist standpoint. I mean, so they don't believe in continuity. On the other hand, the other thinkers, they consider continuity as more fundamental, and discretization is only our way of knowing it as much as possible. So this could be the two. So you know, I mean, taking a position is there, no problem. But if you claim that continuity as such is illusory, and then maybe people will differ.
Well, I think the Buddhist philosophy is very revealing here. You know, especially the non-duality, the duality between the continuous and discrete, is an illusion. There is no duality between the continuous and the discrete. They are the same thing. I take that as a very Buddhist point of view. And that's my attitude to physics, where there's a contradiction between the standard model of particle physics and general relativity. It's a dualist attitude. It's saying, on the one hand, we've got the standard model of particle physics, which is a kind of discrete model. On the other hand, we've got this continuous model of gravity and relativity, and they don't fit together. Well, my philosophy is that general relativity and particle physics are not contradictory. They are simply two different ways of looking at what is actually the same thing. The continuous version of general relativity and the discrete version of quantum mechanics are actually the same thing. That's what I believe. That's what I'm working towards. So call me a Buddhist if you want. I think I probably am.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jam?
Okay.
I think
Jam?
my laptop is about to run out of battery
So
power.
Sir,
I
just
have
one, two questions.
I have one question. I have one request, not question. Is it possible in near future, if you in detail you talk about that particular discrete model of physics in any time in near future? Is it possible? Then it will be great. We can know about more detail which model, discrete model of physics you are talking about. Is it possible to know it in more detail in near future?
Well, I hope so. I'm writing a paper on it at the moment. It's 9 pages today. I wrote 1 page this morning. Which is, I told you what the page that I wrote, actually. It was the page that describes how the finite group of the cube matches up with the Dirac matrices that generate a different group. So that was the page that I wrote this morning. So maybe tomorrow I'll write another page, and maybe in a week it might be ready. Then maybe I'll try and post it on the archive and see what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Jam, sir, just one more question. I want Jam to comment something.
No, sorry, it's already very late and Wilson probably has to go. Yeah, I had a very different question, but maybe there is no time to ask about it. This is on complexity, whether Conway, I mean, he talked about many open problems about PNP question. I've seen a remark by him, but I've never seen him talk about complexity theory. So I just wanted to know if you had considered problems on computationally hard problems, lower bounds, etc.
Sorry, I missed some of that because I had to go and plug in my laptop because it had run out of battery.
Okay.
So,
Jan,
so
can you
now I've,
please repeat?
Yeah. So I was asking about complexity and the
Yep.
PNP question, and whether Conway had something, and what about your own views on that, and Conway on this as well. Yeah.
Yes, P and NP. He must have mentioned it, but I don't really remember what he
So,
said about it.
I remember reading a remark in an interview where he said, um, "Well, I believe that we don't know how to prove things to be hard, and we don't have techniques. But by the time we do it, it'll be just a footnote. So, when we actually solve the problem, it'll be just a footnote in that." Is what he said in an interview, but it was an intriguing comment in the middle of many things, and that's it. And so I never saw anything else related to complexity and what he was doing. So,
Well, as I say, I don't really know what he thought about that, so I don't think I've got anything really that I can add. Sorry.
that's fine.
Okay. Anyone else
I
having any other question? Yeah, Sumit.
uh, yes, sir. I'm Sumit. I am working on primitive polynomial over Galois field. Sir, I have just one small question. That there is any polynomial with integral coefficient whose Galois group is the monster group?
Uh, I don't know.
As,
I've,
either there is any relation between monster group and Galois group?
it is known that the monster is a Galois group over the rationals. That is known, I think. Um, but more than that, I don't know. I'm afraid I've rather lost touch with mathematics in the last few years, so I'm doing physics nowadays. And although people still want me to work on the monster, I've lost interest in it.
Okay, it's okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank
And
you.
I think that in some way Conway was rather the same, that he was interested in one thing for a period of time, and then he moved on to something else. So that he was interested in group theory when he was in Cambridge, and as soon as he left Cambridge, he completely lost interest in group theory. Really never did any group theory again after that. And he was very much influenced by who was around him and who he could talk to and what problems other people had and how he could help with these other problems.
Sir, I have just one more question, sir. This is Shukanna. Actually, nowadays we are finding like that a large group of researchers are doing the research in the domain of machine learning and data science. And we can see actually the basic key mathematical and statistical concepts seems to have been developed actually a few years back, and nowadays we are finding these fields like machine learning and data sciences are mainly data driven. That means actually we are not finding so much what should I actually what should I say actually mathematical development we are not finding nowadays. Mainly it is data driven kind of thing. So what's your views on that?
I have no interest in the data science at all. So
Okay. Okay, sir.
I don't
Okay.
call it. I don't count it as mathematics.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Muti and
I
all.
guess
Mhm.
I guess we have to stop. We are making you talk for more than 1.5 hours already. Thank you so much,
Okay.
sir, for
Thank
giving us
you.
so much of your time. And as like Shobik said, if it is possible for you to give us a lecture on your work, then we will be very happy to listen to you. Maybe regarding the discrete model, which you are saying that it is a cellular automata. Once you complete it, maybe we'll be happy to listen to you, your model of physics, which you are claiming as cellular automata, if it is possible for you.
Well, we'll see when I've got something that you might be interested in hearing about. Then
Sir,
we can
we are
talk about.
very much interested in hearing anything you will be sharing with us. So, like,
Yeah, right.
we are making you talk for more than 1.5 hours, and still we have lots of queries to ask you. Just we are stopping because of yes, it is already so much of late. So,
Okay.
thank you
Well,
so much.
we can
Yeah.
communicate by email anyway.
Okay.
So
Yes,
and thank you very much for having me and for your listening to me and so on.
So we are really grateful to you, sir. You spent so much time with us, and shared so many things. Your memory with Conway. So everything is very great here. I'm grateful to you. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
Kavalika, you have some announcement, maybe?
yeah. Next week we have the next program. But time I am not yet announcing. Only we have again the next session of our lecture on next week, next Saturday, and then on the next Saturday also our program is there. So I request all of you to please find time to join us, and I request Professor Wilson also if it is possible for you to stay with us at that time, then please find time to join us. It will be good to listen to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. And last time.